Okay, colleagues, good afternoon and welcome to the third meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on the bill that has been agreed by the Assembly that we will scrutinise on their behalf. At this stage, members, can I welcome you here today and welcome our colleagues from RAISE who are going to provide us with a overview of the regimes in other parts of this island. I have received apologies from John Stewart. Members have any others? No? Okay. Declarations of interest. Members, as agreed at the last committee, a standing item that will be declared for all members in attendance is that we have a financial interest in the work of the committee. Are members content that that's agreed again? Okay, thank you. Chairperson's business. Members, I have none. Draft minutes are at page 7 of the meeting pack. Are members content that I sign that as a true and accurate reflection of our deliberations? Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Matters arising. Are there any matters that members wish to raise from the minutes that aren't included in the detail later on? No. If not, we then move to item 5, which is a oral briefing from the Assembly and Research Information Services, which is from page 13 to 50 of your pack. Delighted that Ray has joined us this afternoon. Ray, thank you very much indeed, and if I can hand over to you, sir, if you are content.
Lovely, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So the research provides information on the main aspect of regimes governing the pay and allowance of members of the other legislatures, as mentioned by the Chair. But as the bill focuses really on members' pay and the establishment of the proposed Remuneration Board, that's what I'll concentrate on today, so not so much the allowance side of things. So I'm going to set out the pay regimes in the other legislatures with the emphasis on how members' pay is set and administered in Wales, Scotland, Westminster and the Republic of Ireland. And members just need to place the research in a bit of context. So the figures in relation to pay are the subject of ongoing consultations in at least 2 of the other places and are likely to change in the near future. But the research couldn't second guess the outcomes of this, so I have to work with the figures currently in place. So to begin with, I'll just give the headline figures. The basic salary for members. So obviously, as members know, Northern Ireland Assembly is 52,500. Scottish Parliament 72,196, Senate in Wales 72,057, House of Commons 91,346, and then figures in euros, Dáil Éireann 113,679, and then Seanad Éireann 79,614. So, beginning with Wales, the Independent Remuneration Board of the Senate was established under Section 3 of the National Assembly for Wales Remuneration Measure 2010. The board's functions, which are set out in Section 3 of the measure, are to determine the level of remuneration and system of financial support for members, which enables them to perform their members' duties. And then the board's decision is subsequently set out in its determination. Under Section 13 of the 2010 measure, the board may not make more than one determination per Senate session unless it believes there are exceptional circumstances to allow it to do so. Members' pay is automatically adjusted on an annual basis, and there is an ongoing consultation due to the board believing that there were exceptional circumstances to allow it to do so. So it's just an example of how it can depart from sort of the normal pattern. The board regularly considers if any changes to the determination are needed in advance of the next financial year, and this really ensures that the remuneration package is sufficient. So it undertakes what it calls its annual review, and looking wider than that, its preparations are already underway for its determination for the next Senate mandate. That would be the 7th Senate mandate. Section 2.4 of the 2010 measure sets out a list of consultees and requires the board to consult with those that might be affected by its decisions before it exercises any of its functions, except when the board considers that there are circumstances that would make it inappropriate to do so. And the consultees are members of the Senate, staff employed by members of the Senate or by groups of members, relevant trade unions and such other persons as it considers appropriate. And I suppose this last point gives the board fairly wide parameter in terms of who it wishes to consult with. So the board has statutory duties, but when making its determination, it also has regards to the following principles. Now, these aren't statutory, these are principles that have been adopted by the board. So A, financial support and remuneration for members should support the strategic purpose of the Senate and facilitate the work of its members. B, decisions must be appropriate within the context of Welsh earnings and the wider financial circumstances of Wales. And C, the system of financial support for members must be robust, clear, transparent, sustainable, inclusive, and represent value for money for the taxpayer. In terms of membership, Section 1 of the 2010 measure establishes the Remuneration Board and states the members of the board are the chair and 4 other members. And the current membership and their biographies are at Appendix 2 if members wish to read further on that. Schedule 1 sets out persons who are disqualified from membership of the board. There's a fairly lengthy list. I'll just run through maybe the first 6 or 7. So a member of the Senate, as you would expect, the Counsel General, a candidate for election as a member of the Senate, a person whose name could, if the seat of a member of the Senate became vacant, be required to fill that seat, a member of the European Parliament, House of Commons, Scottish Parliament or the Northern Ireland Assembly, a member of the staff of the Senate, a member of the staff of the Welsh Government, and then there's another 5 or 6 you could send like standards commissioners and independent advisors. The chair and other members of the board hold office for a fixed term of 5 years from the date of their respective appointments. No person may be appointed to be a member of the board if that person has already been appointed to be a member of the board on 2 occasions. Chair, turning next to the House of Commons, the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, or IPSA, was established under the Parliamentary Standards Act 2009, which was amended by the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act 2010. IPSA has 3 main responsibilities: to regulate MP staffing and business costs, to determine MPs' pay and pension arrangements, and to provide financial support to MPs in carrying out their parliamentary functions. And IPSA is also required to publish determinations on member salaries, as is the Remuneration Board. It must review salaries within the first year of a new parliament, but may also do at any other time it deems appropriate. Section 4A7 of the Parliamentary Standards Act 2009 states that in reviewing a determination and before making the first determination, IPSA must consult the review body on senior salaries, persons appearing to IPSA to represent persons likely to be affected by the determination or the review, the Minister for the Civil Service, the Treasury, and any other person IPSA considers appropriate. So again, fairly wide parameters when it comes to consultation. One of its guiding principles that underpins IPSA's pay decisions is that the outcome should be fair to both MPs and taxpayers, having regard to the experience of constituents and MPs' overall remuneration. In terms of membership, IPSA must consist of the following: 1 member who is to chair it, and that's appointed in accordance with paragraph 2, which I'll come on to, and 4 other members. Paragraph 2 states that at least one of the members of IPSA must be a person who has held but no longer holds high judicial office, and that will be the chairperson. At least one of the members of IPSA must be a person who is eligible for appointment as a statutory auditor. One of the members of IPSA must be a person who has been but is no longer a member of the House of Commons. And apart from the parliamentary member, a person who has been a member of the House of Commons at any time within the last 5 years may not be a member of IPSA. So it's really just clarifying that one person, a former member, must be a member of IPSA. Members of the board are appointed for fixed terms of up to 5 years. They can be reappointed for a further term of up to 3 years. And again, the current membership and their biographies is listed at Appendix 3 if members are interested in that. So because IPSA not only sets, it administers both the pay and allowances to MPs, it has a fairly significant staffing support, unlike the Remuneration Board in Wales. I think it employs around 100 staff. So the board is supported by an executive, which is responsible for the day-to-day running of IPSA. The board also appoints an independent compliance officer who investigates complaints made about MPs' claims and reviews decisions taken by IPSA. Turning to Scottish Parliament, Chair, so they're somewhat different to the previous 2 models in that the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body, which is essentially their commission, has the power to determine salaries and allowances payable to members, and they have this power under Section 81 of the Scotland Act 1998. And the Scottish Parliament salary scheme sets out how salaries are administered. So according to the scheme, any salary payable by virtue of the scheme shall be amended to reflect any increase in the index for the mean annual earnings of public sector full-time workers in Scotland, as provided for by the annual survey of hours and earnings produced by ONS, or other such index as the Parliamentary Corporation may from time to time deem appropriate. Members, the paper sets out some of the context of that, in that they're moving away from that ICE measurement to, I think, the weekly earnings index, because they feel it's more appropriate. But there's more detail on that set out in the paper. The Parliamentary Corporation may, at such intervals as it deems appropriate, make arrangements to review and determine the salaries payable. And again, they're liaising with, or they've put their budget bid to the Finance and Administration Committee just recently, setting out the proposed increase for members' pay. In discharging its function, the Parliamentary Corporation shall obtain advice on salary levels from such person or persons as it deems appropriate. Members, finally, Houses of the Oireachtas. And again, this is another different model, one whereby the Department of Public Expenditure, NDP Delivery and Reform is responsible for setting the salaries of members of the Oireachtas and office holders. So the Oireachtas is actually responsible for the administration of salaries. So in other words, just processing the salaries and allowances. And just to provide a bit of context, in the second stage debate on the Houses of the Oireachtas Commission Amendment Bill 2024, the Minister for Public Expenditure, Deputy Pascal Donohoe, stated the Commission does not set the level of remuneration payable to TDs and Senators. Responsibility for salaries, pensions and allowances is conferred on me in my role as the Minister for Public Expenditure. And just beyond that, the salaries of TDs is linked to the Public Service Pay Agreement, which covers the period 2024 to 2026. This applies to public sector workers. So, Chair, what we have really are essentially four different models: an independent body in Wales that sets salaries and allowances, but with the Senate responsible for its day-to-day administration; an independent body in Westminster that both determines the level of remuneration and allowances, but also administers those regimes; Scottish Parliament, whereby the equivalent of the Commission determines members' pay and allowances, and which is administered in-house; and finally the Oireachtas, whereby the government sets the level of remuneration, but the Oireachtas administers the regime. So I suppose, Chair, the Welsh model is perhaps the closest to what is provided for in the bill. And I'm sure the committee might be interested in hearing more from the Welsh experience. Chair, I'll finish there. As I said at the start, the paper contains a lot of other information, but I wanted to keep the focus within the parameters of the bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Ray. Firstly, thank you for the quality of that report. 40 pages is really, really useful for members' discussion and deliberation. So I know you said there's 4 different regimes across these islands, Ray, but my understanding reading this, so both Wales and Westminster, they have a independent body who sets the level of pay for member salary, is that correct? Yeah,
that's correct. So they are quite different to the Scottish and Oireachtas models. Yeah, they have the independent body.
Yeah, so and in terms of the membership of those, one of the issues that has attracted most public commentary is the provision within the bill that would remove the disbarment on former members of the Assembly sitting on the panel. Obviously, the bill doesn't guarantee that a former member, or require that a former member sits on it, as similar to IPSA, but removes that disbarring. Are there any of the other legislatures that disbar former members of that institution from sitting on the panel?
Not disbar, no. And obviously, IPSA even go a step further and says you must have a former member on the board.
Okay, no, that's fine. Those two are useful from my perspective. Does any other member have any questions? Paula?
Thank you, Ray, for your paper. I had a few questions. Is that okay, Chair? So, in the Welsh Senate, it talks about the strategic purpose of the Senate. I'm just wondering, do you know how they define that, and what does that actually mean? You know, in determining the remuneration, they talk about the strategic purpose.
I didn't find any detail on that. I suppose it's set out in their corporate plan, really the corporate objectives of whatever the Senate is, and the remuneration for members should reflect that. How that's done in practice, I'm not. Okay, so I wouldn't be entirely sure.
Okay, thank you. So, again, the Welsh Assembly there talked about accountability, value for money and transparency, and I think that does read across all of them in some way. So do you know how they achieve that? Is it through consultation? And you know, how do they present it in a way that Joe Blogs could look online and see how these salaries have been arrived at?
Oh, there's a detailed determination that sets out how the Remuneration Board has arrived at its findings, and it's available online. All their determinations going back since the inception of the Remuneration Board, so all the detail is set out there. So it provides a lot of information, and it's easily accessible to anyone.
Okay, and sorry, just the second point to that. So do they go out to consult after every due determination?
Yes, they are required to consult. So as part of that, they will. And interestingly, the Remuneration Board also has two, I suppose you would call them, well, working groups might be a bit much, but they have two groups consisting of members and member staff that they can liaise with on an ongoing basis, which I thought was actually quite interesting, even beyond the consultation process. So I think that's a useful source of information.
Okay, thank you. And finally for me, Chair, so you also provided information on the different office holders. So they've got the basic elected representatives salary, and then you've got the First Minister, etc. So again, is there transparency, or have you got an understanding of how they calculate that in terms of measuring the additional responsibilities?
I don't know in terms of measuring the additional responsibilities.
Arriving at the
arriving
figure,
at, well, its starting point is sort of the formula that it would use for member salaries.
Yes.
And then, so for example, you see that in Wales, I think, is it, or the Scottish Parliament, they have to consult the First Minister when it comes to ministerial office holders.
Okay.
So I don't have the detail of how they arrive at the ministerial or office holder salaries, but I'm happy to go away and look at that further.
Yeah. No, I think it's probably part of this in terms of how the Remuneration Board will engage with the different levels of responsibility in here. So thank you.
Just to follow up on one of the points that Paula made, so whenever IPSA and Wales make their draft determination, that goes out to public consultation?
Yes, they consult on it, yes.
Okay, and that's similar to what's proposed in this bill. Okay, that's perfect. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. It is very helpful to get an insight into what is happening in other jurisdictions generally. I think the one we can least compare to is probably Westminster, because it's single-seated constituencies, but we're probably most closely aligned to either the Scottish or the Welsh model. But when you look across the figures, even from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, what is the reason for such a disparity? I know there's a lot of public criticism about the level, or there's concern about the potential level of whatever happens by the independent panel. But how is it the case that the Northern Ireland Assembly is sitting £20,000 behind the other two in comparison? Is it because they were getting incrementally a higher increase per year, or what? How did it get? How is there such a gap?
I think one of the reasons must be that, obviously the Assembly has had breaks in its existence. Take for example the Welsh model. They've been going since 2010. Every year they review the salaries to see what's needed, to see them in other places. I think the salaries for the Northern Ireland Assembly just haven't been looked at really in such a long time, so they've obviously fallen behind the other places, and the other places haven't placed these consistent mechanisms for reviewing and potentially increasing, not always increasing, they haven't always taken that decision, but potentially increasing on an annual basis, which the Assembly hasn't had.
And just thanks for that. And just in terms of comparisons with the civil service, so the salary line of an MLA today, where would that be on grade in terms of the civil service? Have you any information on that?
I don't know what it is in terms of the civil service. In terms of the Assembly, it would be grade 5.
Which is what?
Which is actually my grade, so it's a researcher grade. Okay. In terms of the civil service, I'm not entirely sure how the civil service grading works. I think it works the other. So grade 7 would be higher than, whereas here it works in reverse. So grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. But I'm not sure where it sits on the civil service scale.
So permanent secretary would be grade what?
1.
1.
Okay. And
the highest.
okay, and not, I don't know there's a clerk here, and a clerk of a committee, where would they be in the grade?
Of the Assembly,
Not the,
4.
okay. So, an ML, okay. I'm trying to point to why there is such a gap in where we are on a comparative level with other people in senior positions, even within the Assembly or the civil service, and then looking at other jurisdictions as well. I know this isn't a popular subject, but there's very clearly an issue.
You want to say something? I don't want you to out your salary.
No, it wasn't.
No, I know you would.
No, but I mean, I think all assembly salaries and civil service pay scales are in the public domain.
Yes.
But although the pay scales would be slightly different, generally speaking, a clerk would be aligned to civil service grade 7,
Okay.
and AG5 researcher grade would be aligned to civil service deputy principal grade.
I wasn't using the clerk
But,
for any particular reason.
Yeah,
just
they're
trying to
not
get an
directly
idea. Yeah.
aligned because they
Yeah.
use a different job evaluation and grading system, but generally speaking, that's where they were originally whenever the Assembly broke from the civil service.
Okay, and right, I suppose really, Chair, the question that I'm really getting at, when you look at the salary of someone in a similar position to us in Scotland or in Wales, where are they in comparison to someone at a civil service level compared to where we are, if you understand? I'm wondering how this is aligned, really, as well, and maybe someone else has an answer to the question. So, for instance, in Scotland, is the member in line with, for instance, the salary of a permanent secretary or a senior civil servant? I'm just asking how it's aligned, basically. Is it tied to a particular thing?
Well, I think one of the things to emphasise is that the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, can take into a whole range of factors when they're actually setting the salaries and determining members' pay and allowances. So it's not necessarily tied to one particular grade or position. But that certainly would be taken into account, or can be taken into account, when these bodies are making their decisions.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Just, I think is the point. So I know that our members' allowances to employ our staff in our constituency offices are then tied to Assembly Commission pay awards. So if Assembly Commission staff receive a 4 or 5% increase, then our staff automatically receive it because
Yes.
they're aligned to it, which I think is a useful one, but that currently doesn't exist. Okay, Paula.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in. Just to pick up on Daniel's point there, and I'm not sure whether I know you weren't asked to do this research, but in case you came across it, so some of the public commentary when this bill was first brought into the public domain was that we have less constituents per head. I'm just wondering, do you have that information to hand? And maybe that is what's linked into the reviews that are taking place in the other parliaments to sort of realign them?
I don't have that information.
Okay,
I
no, that's
don't.
fine.
No.
That's fine.
I know the Senate is increasing its numbers,
Yeah. They're underrepresented.
so that must have a knock-on impact on the work of the Remuneration Board.
Yeah, okay. That's something I'll look into. Thank you.
And just a supplement to that question, is there a difference in the level of powers that we have compared to Scotland and Wales? Have we? Is there certain things we have more power on than Wales? Am I right in saying that? I'm not sure.
Yes, there will be. Now Scotland has taxation powers, etc. But
In terms of Wales, we have power over energy, which they don't have, and then in relation to issues around welfare, which we have, which they don't have.
and possibly justice as well.
Yes, of course.
Justice as well. So there are definitely aspects where the Assembly has a greater range of devolved powers. Absolutely, yes.
And employment law, sorry. Just, Kathy.
Yeah, just want to clarify something you'd mentioned there about the consultee process, and you'd mentioned trade unions. And apologies, I came in slightly late, and just wanted to clarify where that was or what they were consulted upon.
That was in relation to.
Apologies, I missed it at the start.
No, it's the Senate Remuneration Board is required to consult relevant trade unions, when it's making its determination on
On salaries?
salaries. Yeah.
Right, okay. That's not to do with setting up the remuneration board then?
No.
That's purely to do with setting
Yeah.
the salary?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, happy enough. Gary?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ray, for that. Obviously, there's a lot of information in there. Probably a lot of it's very and more relevant to the Remuneration Board themselves,
Yes.
and they'll be deliberating in terms of the salaries, etc. But it's a useful conversation to have. Just a quick question for me. One of the issues that was raised last week with the Commission was around potentially people who are on the board standing for election. Obviously, after the deliberations are completed and the recommendations are made, I see one of the proposals from the in terms of the membership for the Welsh model was that ruling people out. One of those was the candidate for election. Is that the only? It seems to be they're the only body that seems to have excluded people standing from election. Is it just people who have notified? So, for example, our election isn't happening until 2027.
Mm-hmm.
The Commission have indicated they're going to look at the potential of how do you exclude people from them benefiting from the.
Well, I would read the Welsh one as a candidate for election. I mean, I don't think that's forever.
Yes.
I don't think you can bar someone.
No, of course not. No. But it's just in terms of
So if a member was a member of the Remuneration Board, and then a number of years after decided to run for election, I mean, I think that's
just
fine.
if there's a current election,
I think if it's a current election or someone who has put their name forward saying, well, if that seat becomes vacant, I'm happy to fill that. They're barred from that, but not in terms of forever. Really, I think that would be a fairly radical step
And illegal.
and illegal.
It's not something I'd be actively encouraging. It's just as a point that obviously has been made in terms of the Welsh as a candidate. But
Yeah.
I just have one more question. So, just in terms of the public commentary from some MLAs in relation to whatever level the Independent Remuneration Board set the level at, whether that's a decrease or an increase, they have a particular view that it shouldn't be an increase. I was just wondering, was there an opt-out option in any of the other legislatures? So, some of those members who have been on the public record saying that they don't want to pay rise or don't think that they have the ability then, if the Remuneration Board do determine an increase, that they can then publicly have the option to opt out of that?
Not in the literature I review, Chair. No, I mean, I suppose.
I noticed that some of those who have made those comments have tabled amendments, but the opt-out amendment hasn't come forward from them yet, so maybe it might just be something the committee might want to look at.
Suggestion.
In terms of the office holders, I know some of the office holders, I think Scotland, definitely Westminster, don't take their full salary. So I know, for example, the Prime Minister doesn't take his full salary. But in terms of members, no, I mean, whatever they want to do once the salary's paid to them is up to them.
Of course.
But no opt-out, no.
No, just for the record, I think maybe Gary's maybe the only one who urged Daniel as well, maybe. Do you remember we got a pay rise after the 3 years, and then there was the opportunity for people to give as you earn?
Yeah.
So some of us did give us we earn. So I wonder if that's something we need to formalise,
Right.
because it was a bit of work for those on the fourth floor, but there is the option to let go of.
Just that, I know that some members have a particular view on this, so it would just be useful for us to just test out to see if we can have an amendment in place in legislation that they can opt out of it, and then they can then go back onto the media and inform their constituents when they opted out of it, saying that they've made their views on this issue known to date. Okay, Ray, thank you so much for that, sir. That was very, very useful. I imagine the Remuneration Board will be keen to get your research and other people's research, particularly around the powers of this place in comparison to other places, and the range of powers that the Assembly may have or may not have in comparison to others. So that's very, very useful. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. Okay, members, just turning then to correspondence. There are none into the committee at this stage, is that, or for this
No
meeting?
correspondence for this meeting.
Okay, forward work plan at page 53. Jim, if you want to cover that. So Jim's just going to outline, IPSA have agreed to come to the committee.
So the commissioned, the committee has asked IPSA to provide oral evidence. Or IPSA have indicated they're available on the 11th of March, Tuesday week, but they're only available in the morning. So provisionally pending committee's agreement, I've asked them to hold the date of 10 o'clock on the 11th. So it's Tuesday. Members would be
Members happy enough with that?
I suppose that part of the meeting should be no more than an hour. Members had agreed previously to receive written evidence from Wales, so that's pending. I don't know if members want to consider oral evidence from...
Maybe, yeah, I was just going to raise the point that I know we can't rescind the decision, so just looking at the Scottish system now, that thank you who have informed us properly, they obviously set their own, and that's not relevant to us because we... well, me personally speaking, but I'm sure for everyone, we don't want to have any role in setting our own salary. So I'm not sure that their system is as closely aligned as this bill proposes. Wales is probably much closer in terms of having that independent panel. So we're members of the view that might be more benefiting getting oral evidence from Wales, given that it's more closely aligned to what's being proposed in this bill rather than Scotland. Members content with that? Okay.
And then, Chair, there was the Oireachtas Commission. The Assembly had previously agreed to receive oral evidence from the Oireachtas Commission. Now, it seems that the Oireachtas Commission, although they have a role, it's the Minister for Public Expenditure who actually determines the salary. So again, it seems to be very different.
Yeah, and I don't think Minister O'Dowd would want to have the task of setting MLA salary either. So again, do we want to just seek written correspondence from them at this stage and then not oral, because again there's no independent panel setting that. It's done by government ministers, which I don't think anyone in this place would want to see take place.
And Chair, I think that's where you're right to reflect it. I think that's where the public mood is, and absolutely where we should be. And
Sorry, Chair, that will require the committee to rescind the previous decisions. So obviously committee can't do it this week because notice has to be given. So notice can be provided to members then that that decision can be rescinded at next week's meeting, pending members' agreement.
Yep. And that just shows the benefit of your research. Okay, thank you, members. Anything else in the forward work plan, Jim, you want to cover at this stage?
Nothing at this stage, just to remind members that next week the examiner's statutory rules will be attending, and as is normal, that will be in closed session.
And our call for evidence is continuing to be open. Okay. Members, is there any other relevant business at this stage? If not, then we'll be back here Tuesday the 4th of March at 1 p.m. to hear from the ESR. Thank you very much indeed for attending.
Thank you.
We'll just wait until we go.
Committee Room 30. Sound. Committee Room 30. Sound.